Hello, my Stormer Show audience, my champions of the storm. As always, hello, and thank you for watching. Today we've got a daily reading series show planned for you all. A bedtime story, if you will. Hope you all enjoy. If you do, don't forget to follow, don't forget to share. Thank you in advance for any chats and donations I receive as well. I am playing with the idea of doing different gaming streams here on Twitch that are audio only. It's just my simple voice-based commentary, and yeah, they would be part of a complete game series that I would have, and my voice over would just be all throughout my gameplay footage. If that's something you guys would like to see, by all means let me know. I'm always thinking up different ideas for the stream, different topics to talk about and just chatting, different games to play and try. I may even consider React content. I know debates have surged in popularity. Hassan reacts to news. XQC is also trying a few different reaction-based streams, and I've seen footage of Destiny recently debating. I may consider something like that on my channel in the future. I can offer my different takes on different issues. The Stormer Show in the past hasn't been very political, and I may want to keep it that way. Okay, without further ado, let's begin. Sapiens. Sapiens, I guess, can get political when we talk about different political institutions, different economic systems. It's definitely not the lightest of concepts, the lightest type of content. Some of the ideas that Yuval explores in Sapiens is pretty complex in nature, but I'll do what I can to simplify these concepts for a general audience. And thank you for joining me. Okay. The collapse of the family and community. Yuval was alluding to yesterday how families and communities have given way to more, as he describes, state and let's see, what are the words he uses? Yes, markets, state and market-based systems. And we'll have to see in our exploration of the collapse in the family and community chapter how he expands on this concept. And I'll offer my input and feedback throughout, in addition to the reading component, as somewhat of a discussion format. And I invite you to chat and participate through your chat as well. Okay. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, the daily life of most humans ran its course within three ancient frames: the nuclear family, the extended family, and the local intimate community. Most people worked in the family business, the family farm, or the family workshop, for example. Like the mom and pop shoe shop could be seen as another example. Or they worked in their neighbors' family businesses. The family was also the welfare system, the health system, the education system, the construction industry, the trade union, the pension fund, the insurance company, the radio, the television, the newspapers, the bank, and even the police. It's like the family unit comprised most, if not all, practical community-based functions. When a person fell sick, the family took care of her. When a person grew old, the family supported her, and her children were her pension fund. When a person died, the family took care of the orphans. If a person wanted to build a hut, the family lent a hand. If a person wanted to open a business, the family raised the necessary money. If a person wanted to marry, the family chose or at least vetted the prospective spouse. I would argue with Yuval, I would say I would make the argument on this topic that it still is that case to some extent in the modern day. Families do take some part, play some role in the overall family structure. Maybe not to the extent that it once did, but I think it is still the case. If the person wanted to open a business, the family raised the necessary money. If a person wanted to marry, the family chose or at least vetted the prospective spouse. Yeah, sorry. If I read and reread, I'm sorry. I lose my place sometimes. If conflict arose with the neighbor, the family muscled in. It's like the Hatfield and McCoys. Yeah, that's a good example. But if a person's illness was too great for the family to manage, or a new business demanded too large an investment, or the neighborhood quarrel escalated to the point of violence, the local community came to the rescue. It's like the community. Families and communities working together to solve problems that are too big for the family to solve. The community offered help on the basis of local traditions and an economy of favors, which often differed greatly from the supply and demand laws of the free market. In an old-fashioned medieval community, when my neighbor was in need, I helped build his hut and guard his sheep without expecting any payment in return. When I was in need, my neighbor returned the favor. Again, people working together. At the same time, the local potentate might have drafted all of us villagers to construct his castle without paying us a penny. In exchange, we counted on him to defend us against brigands and barbarians. Village life involved many transactions, but few payments. There were some markets, of course, but the roles were limited. You could buy rare spices, cloth, and tools, and hire the services of lawyers and doctors. Yet less than 10% of commonly used products and services were bought in the market. Most human needs were taken care of by the family and community. There were also kingdoms and empires that performed important tasks, such as waging wars, building roads, and constructing palaces. For these purposes, kings raised taxes and occasionally enlisted soldiers and laborers. Yet with few exceptions, they tended to stay out of the daily affairs of families and communities. Even if they wanted to intervene, most kings could do so only with difficulty. Traditional agricultural economies had few surpluses with which to feed crowds of government officials, policemen, social workers, teachers, and doctors. Consequently, most rulers did not develop mass welfare systems, healthcare systems, or educational systems. They left such matters in the hands of families and communities. Even on rare occasions when rulers tried to intervene more intensively in the daily lives of the peasantry, as happened, for example, in the Qin Empire in China, they did so by converting family heads and community elders into government agents. Often enough, transportation and communication difficulties made it so difficult to intervene in the affairs of remote communities that many kingdoms preferred to cede even the most basic royal prerogatives, such as taxation and violence, to communities. Closer to home, easier to handle. The Ottoman Empire, for instance, allowed family vendettas to mete out justice rather than supporting a large imperial police force. If my cousin killed somebody, the victim's brother might kill me and sanction revenge. It's like eye for an eye type thing. The Sultan in Istanbul or even the provincial pasha did not intervene in such clashes as long as violence remained within acceptable limits. I believe it's considered an ideology that's a descendant of the Code of Hammurabi. That was used at that time. In the Chinese Ming Empire, which lasted from 1368 to 1644, the population was organized into the Baoji system. Let's see if I'm saying it correctly. The definition's not found, of course. Baoji system. In this system, 10 families were grouped to form a jia, and 10 jia constituted a bao. When a member of a bao committed a crime, other bao members could be punished for it, in particular the bao elders. It's like the entire unit was connected in the bao system. Yeah, the old folks are the ones who received the brunt. Taxes too were levied on the bao, and it was the responsibility of the bao elders rather than of the state officials to assess the situation of each family and determine the amount of tax it should pay. Typically, the elders are considered the head of family units, and that was the system in place there in China too. Let's see. Yeah, they handled the issues, they determined the tax level. From the empire's perspective, this system had a huge advantage. Instead of maintaining thousands of revenue officials and tax collectors who would have to monitor the earnings and expenses of every family, these tasks were left to the community elders. These elders knew how much each villager was worth, and they could usually enforce tax payments without involving the imperial army. It's like closeness also makes it easier to leverage the nature of relationships. Many kingdoms and empires were in truth little more than large protection rackets. The king was the capo di tutti capi, who collected protection money, and in return made sure that neighboring crime syndicates and local small fry did not harm those under his protection. He did little else. Life in the bosom of the family and community was far from ideal. Families and communities could oppress their members no less brutally than do modern states and markets, and their internal dynamics were often fraught with tension and violence. Yet people had little choice. A person who lost her family and community around 1750 was as good as dead. It's like the support structure. Everything was centralized. Yeah. It's like without your support structure, you fell through the cracks. She had no job, no education, and no support in times of sickness and distress. Nobody would loan her money or defend her if she got into trouble. There were no policemen, no social workers, and no compulsory education. In order to survive, such a person quickly had to find an alternative family or community. Yeah, I think this happens in some social orders of other types of animals as well. I think wolves, particularly. Lone wolves, you'll see this happen with them. There were no policemen, no social workers, yes. Boys and girls who ran away from home could expect at best to become servants in some new family. So it was like very difficult to make it outside of the family structure. At worst, there was the army or the brothel. All this changed dramatically over the last 2 centuries. The Industrial Revolution gave the market immense new powers, provided the state with new means of communication and transportation, and placed at the government's disposal an army of clerks, teachers, policemen, and social workers. Yes, indeed. A lot of these functions have gone to the government level. A lot of the social services are now under the umbrella of city-states. At first, the market and the state discovered their path blocked by traditional families and communities who had little love for outside intervention. Parents and community elders were reluctant to let the younger generation be indoctrinated by nationalist education systems, conscripted into armies, or turned into a rootless urban proletariat. Proletariat is the working class? Yeah, working class. Yes, the young folk. Over time, states and markets used their growing power to weaken the traditional bonds of family and community. The state sent its policemen to stop family vendettas and replace them with court decisions. The market sent its hawkers to wipe out long-standing local traditions and replace them with ever-changing commercial fashions. Yet this was not enough. In order really to break the power of family and community, they needed the help of a fifth column. The state and the market approached people with an offer that could not be refused. Become individuals, they said. Marry whomever you desire without asking permission from your parents. Take up whatever job suits you, even if community elders frown. Live wherever you wish, even if you cannot make it every week to family dinner. It's like they're starting to shift from social to individual, playing to individuals' wants and desires. And, pro and con, of course. You are no longer dependent on your family or your community. We, the state and the market, will take care of you instead. We will provide food, shelter, education, health, welfare, and employment. We will provide pensions, insurance, and protection. It's like, yeah, pretty much. When the government, when the government handles a lot of these functions, family became less important. It didn't hold the same level of power that it once did. And I don't know, I can probably break down some of the pros and cons of that too before we dive into War and Peace. Romantic literature often presents the individual as somebody caught in a struggle against the state and the market. Nothing can be further from the truth. The state and the market are the mother and father of the individual, and the individual can survive only thanks to them. The market provides us with work, insurance, and a pension. If we want to study a profession, the government schools are there to teach us. If we want to open a business, the bank loans us money. If we want to build a house, a construction company builds it and the bank gives us a mortgage, in some cases subsidized or insured by the state. If violence flares up, the police protect us. If we're sick for a few days, our health insurance takes care of us. It's like, yeah, it's less close to our family unit like, and as a result, it's a little bit more spread out now. Just like if I have an emergency, I have to call my insurance agent. If I get into like a car accident, if someone breaks into my house, I call 911 versus removing the intruder on my own or within my family. And yeah, that increases response time is one clear difference, but on the plus side, it is also it is beneficial in some ways because of the nature of departmental policies. Like, things are very typically transparent through police reports and stuff like that. There's a whole breakdown. If we there's a whole examination. If we are debilitated for months, national social services step in. If we need around-the-clock assistance, we can go to the market and hire a nurse, usually some stranger from the other side of the world who takes care of us with kind devotion that we no longer expect from our own children. It's like if you look at it from a wider angle and perspective, it's almost in a way that we're becoming more connected as a result of the government taking over some of these functions. What I mean by that is it's like everyone's looking to the government to control pandemic response. Like, that's one example. It's like, okay, well, the government's doing what they can to take care of this health crisis situation. It's like it has become a public issue now. Whereas before, it might have been more, the response to crises like that might have been more sequestered, more small scale. Whereas now, it's like a bigger focus. It's like, in a way, we're all becoming more connected. Although one could just as easily argue that we're becoming more disconnected. Social programs. If we need around-the-clock assistance, we can go to the market and hire a nurse. Usually a stranger from the other side of the world who takes care of us with the kind of devotion that we can no longer expect from our kids. If we have the means, we can spend our golden years at a senior citizen's home. The tax authorities treat us as individuals and do not expect us to pay the neighbor's taxes. The courts, too, see us as individuals and never punish us for the crimes of our cousins, or the sins of the father, for that matter. Not only adult men, but also women and children are recognized as individuals. Throughout most of history, women were often seen as the property of family or community. Modern states, on the other hand, see women as individuals, enjoying economic and legal rights independently of their family and community. They may hold their own bank accounts, decide whom to marry, and even choose to divorce or live on their own. Yeah, it's like things are becoming more individualized. Everything's becoming more focused on the individual. But the liberation of the individual comes at a cost. Many of us now bewail the loss of strong families and communities and feel alienated and threatened by the power of impersonal state and market wield over our lives. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, evil pretty much hits the nail on the head here. States and markets composed of alienated individuals can intervene in the lives of their members much more easily than states and markets composed of strong families and communities. When neighbors in a high-rise apartment building cannot even agree on how much to pay their janitor, how can we expect them to resist the state? And by that same token, the state has become much stronger. Yeah, I would say the state has become extremely strong now. The deal between states, markets, and individuals is an uneasy one. The state and the market disagree about their mutual rights and obligations, and individuals complain that both demand too much and provide too little. They complain that both demand too much. Yeah, I guess it's the complaints themselves that they ask too much, is what Evil's saying here. In many cases, individuals are exploited by markets, and states employ their armies, police forces, and bureaucracies to persecute individuals instead of defending them. In worst cases, yes, very much. And he's saying in many cases. It is amazing that this deal works at all, however imperfectly. It's like you need. I guess that's why you need watchdogs and stuff like that. It's like look out for people, you know. Yeah. Look out for everybody. Or where am I? For it breaches countless generations of human social arrangements. Millions of years of evolution have designed us to live and think as community members. Within a mere 2 centuries, we become alienated individuals. Nothing testifies better to the awesome power of culture. And I'm of the belief that part of the reason for this shift is because of the needs of people. The pursuit of happiness of individuals has propelled this change. And similarly, the nature of some problems and issues, particularly from a societal standpoint, has motivated this change. Yeah, the scope of some problems has made it so it's like the burden is placed on the state versus the individual and versus the family and community. The nuclear family did not disappear completely from the modern landscape. When states and markets took from the family most of its economic and political roles, they left some important emotional functions. The modern family is still supposed to provide for intimate needs, which state and market are, so far, incapable of providing. Ewell seems to suggest that at some point, even this capacity of families may be encompassed by the state, which could carry with it some worrisome implication. Yet even here the family is subject to increasing interventions. The market shapes to an ever greater degree the way people conduct their romantic and sexual lives. The topic of abortion could be seen as one example of that. It's like typically this would be seen as a family issue, but the state is doing what it can to control that area of of what we would consider family life an issue. Yeah, take from that what you will, but personally I think it's a little bit worrisome. That's what I think that is. Okay. Yeah, increasing intervention. Like, who knows? We may see a day in time where the state is trying to decide who my wife is going to be. Yeah, I would say continue looking at the climate crisis, because that's probably going to be the angle when some of these changes start taking effect. Whereas traditionally the family was the main matchmaker, today it's the market that tailors our romantic and sexual preferences and then lends a hand in providing for them for a fat fee. Previously, bride and groom met in the family living room and money passed from the hands of one father to another. Today, courting is done at bars and cafes, and money passes from the hands of lovers to waitresses. Even more money is transferred to the bank accounts of fashion designers, gym managers, dietitians, cosmeticians, and plastic surgeons who help us arrive at the cafe, looking as similar as possible to the market's ideal of beauty. Yeah, it's an interesting paradigm. Yeah, it's like follow the money, see where it goes. The pre-modern cycle. Yeah, there's a breakdown that Yuval gives us a diagram: family and community versus state and market, and it's got pre-modern cycle and modern cycle on the other side. Let me see if I can show you guys the graphic that makes the pre-modern cycle. Strong family and community leads to weak state and market, which in turn leads to weak individuals. For the modern cycle, there is weak family and community, which gives to strong state and market, and in turn, strong individuals. And yeah. Weak family and community now. And I don't know, contributes in a way to disconnectedness in the context of our species. The state too keeps a sharper eye on family relations, especially between parents and children. In many countries, parents are obliged to send their children to be educated in government schools, and even when private education is allowed, the state still supervises and vets the curriculum. Parents who are especially abusive or violent with their children may be restrained by the state. If need be, the state may even imprison the parent or transfer their children to foster families. Until not long ago, the suggestion that the state ought to prevent parents from beating or humiliating their children would have been rejected out of hand as ludicrous and unworkable. In most societies, parental authority was sacred. Respect of and obedience to one's parents were among the most hallowed values, and parents could do almost anything they wanted, including killing newborn babies, selling children into slavery, and marrying off daughters to men more than twice their age. Today, parental authority is in full retreat. Youngsters are increasingly excused from obeying their elders, whereas parents are blamed for anything that goes wrong in the life of their child. Yeah, pretty much. It's like, expect people to be saying stuff like, where were the parents? What were they doing when Johnny went to school with a gun and shot 10 people? Yeah, that happens all the time. Youngsters are increasingly excused from obeying their elders. Mom and dad are about as likely to be found innocent in the Freudian courtroom as were defendants in a stall in a show trial. Yeah, like I said, I need to break down some of the concepts in Sapiens. I may continue reading this book off stream to see if I can extract more meaning from the text. Yeah, but yeah, definitely an interesting chapter on Yuval's part. The next chapter is imagined communities. And yeah, I may be reading that one off stream. But yeah, very interesting topics and concepts. Okay, let's take a look in War and Peace. We are in chapter 18. Countess Rostova, with her daughters and a large number of guests, was already seated in the drawing room. The Count took the gentlemen into his study and showed them his collection of Turkish pipes. From time to time he went out to ask, "Hasn't she come yet?" They were expecting Maria Dmitrievna Akrosimova. Again, the Russian names, some of them are hard for me to say. Known in society as the Terrible Dragon. A lady distinguished not for wealth or rank, but for common sense and frank plainness of speech. Maria Dmitrieva was known to the imperial family as well as to all Moscow and Petersburg, and both cities wondered at her, laughed privately at her rudeness, and told good stories about her, while none of the less, all without exception, respected and feared her. "I am scary. People fear me." Courage now there. In the Count's room, which was full of tobacco smoke, they talked of war that had been announced in a manifesto, and about the recruiting. None of them had yet seen the manifesto, but they all knew it had appeared. The Count sat on the sofa between two guests who were smoking and talking. He neither smoked nor talked, but bending his head first to one side and then to the other, watched the smokers with evident pleasure and listened to the conversation of his two neighbors, whom he egged on against each other. One of them was a sallow, clean-shaven civilian with a thin and wrinkled face, already growing old, though he was dressed like a most fashionable young man. He sat with his legs up on the sofa as if quite at home, and having stuck an amber mouthpiece far into his mouth, was inhaling the smoke spasmodically and screwing up his eyes. This was an old bachelor, Shinshin, a cousin of the Countess, a man with a sharp tongue, as they said in Moscow society. He seemed to be condescending to his companion. The latter, a fresh, rosy officer of the guards, irreproachably washed, brushed, and buttoned, held his pipe in the middle of his mouth, with his red lips gently inhaled the smoke, letting it escape from his handsome mouth in rings. This was Lieutenant Berg, an officer in the Semenov regiment, with whom Boris was to travel to join the army, and about whom Natasha had teased her eldest sister Vera, speaking of Berg as her intended. The Count sat between them and listened attentively. His favorite occupation was not playing Boston, a card game he was very fond of, was that of the listener, especially when he succeeded in setting two loquacious talkers at one another. I need to look up the word loquacious because I do not know what it means. Loquacious means in a talkative fashion. People talking a lot is when you say like loquacious talkers, you mean people who talk a lot. Okay. As for which one's easier to say, it's not immediately clear. Like, which one's easier to say, loquacious talkers or people who talk a lot? I think if you say people who talk a lot, it makes more sense that way. But yeah, there you go. You can also say loquacious talkers. You feel like using fancy words. Well then, old chap, Montre Honorable Alphonse Karlovich, said Shin Shin, laughing ironically and mixing the most ordinary Russian expressions with the choicest French phrases, which was a peculiarity of his speech. Yeah, it's like, can I think of a good example? It's like hasta la vista. Is that a good example? I'm not sure. It's like a mixing of English and Spanish. Here it's French and Russian, though. Vous comptez vous faire des rentes sur l'état. You want to make something out of your company, is the true meaning. You expect to make an income out of the government. It's really interesting. It's like two different meanings. It's like one thing that's said with two different meanings. Like double entendre. It's like, yeah. In one way, it is making something out of one's company, and in another way, it is making something out of the government, like taxing. It's like reverse taxation in a way. No, Peter Nikolaevich. I want only to show that in the cavalry the advantages are far less than the infantry. Just consider my own position now, Peter Nikolaevich. Consider this. Berg always spoke quietly, politely, and with great precision. His conversation always related entirely to himself. He would remain calm and silent when the talk related to any topic that had no direct bearing on himself. It's like he knows about himself the most. So whenever he's talking about himself, that's when he's confident, because he's like, okay, I know this. This is me. So I know all about it. And whenever it's not about him, it's like, he's like, yeah, I don't really care as much about what's in the news. That has nothing to do with me at all. Okay, where am I? Yeah, it's a topic with no direct bearing on himself. He could remain silent for hours without being at all put out of countenance himself. It's like him not talking a lot, him being silent, is him being at one. He's like, I'm perfectly fine not saying a whole lot. Yeah, he could do it for hours without making others uncomfortable, which is pretty dang impressive. It's like most people, isn't there like, who's the quiet guy? But yeah, for him, it's okay. But as soon as the conversation concerned himself, he would begin to talk circumstantially and with evident satisfaction. He likes to be in the spotlight. Consider my position, Peter Nikolaevich. Were I in the cavalry, I should get no more than 200 rubles every 4 months, even with the rank of lieutenant. But as it is, I receive 230, said he, looking at Shin Shin and the Count with a joyful, pleasant smile, as if it were obvious to him that his success must always be the chief desire of everyone else. It's like everybody wants to see him win. Yeah, everyone wants to see him win. Besides that, Peter Nikolaevich, by exchanging into the gods, I shall be in a more prominent position, continued Berg, and vacancies occur much more frequently in the foot guards. And just think, what can be done with 230 rubles? I even managed to put a little aside and to send something to my father, he went on, emitting a smoke ring. I don't know, let's take a look. Ruble. I think they actually still use rubles. Yeah, they do. 1 Russian ruble is $0.014 US dollars, according to Google. So, mathematically speaking, about 100 rubles is $1, about. My math is off. 72 Russian rubles is about $1. Because that's right, it's the 0.014. Back then, I think it was like what, the year 1800? Yeah, I guess it would have been even more back then. Yeah, let's see what it says. If I don't get a quick answer, I'll just move on. Let's see, if I'm not mistaken, it's telling me that in the year 1805, a ruble was worth $678 in US dollars. Yeah, if so, let's see, it was 230 rubles. 230 times $677. It's about 150 grand. So, actually pretty good amount of money. Would that have been enough to buy a house back then? Yeah, again, I don't know. But what I do know is it's a pretty good chunk of change. 230 rubles back then. Okay, where was I again? Yeah, I can put some aside and send some to my father. You said emitting a smoke ring. The balance, yes. A German knows how to skin a flint, as the proverb says, remarked Shin Shin, moving his pipe to the other side of his mouth and winking at the Count. Yeah, I think... excuse me. I think practically everyone smoked in those days too. So that squares matters. The Count burst out laughing. The other guests, seeing that Shin Shin was talking, came up to listen. Berg oblivious of irony or indifference, continued to explain how by exchanging into the guards he had already gained a step on his old comrades at the cadet corps. How in wartime the company commander might get killed, and he, as senior in the company, might easily succeed to the post. How popular he was with everyone in the regiment, and how satisfied his father was with him. Berg evidently enjoyed narrating all of this, and did not seem to suspect that others, too, might have their own interests. But all he said was so prettily sedate, and the naivete of this youthful egotism was so obvious, that he disarmed his hearers. Yeah, it's like people liked they liked his simple way. It's like, howdy, y'all. Well, my boy, you'll get along wherever you go. Foot or horse, that I'll warrant, said Shin Shin, patting him on the shoulder and taking his feet off the sofa. Berg smiled joyously. The Count, by his guests, went into the drawing room. It was the moment before a big dinner when the assembled guests, expecting a summons to Zakuska, avoid engaging in any long conversation but think it necessary to move about and talk, in order to show that they are not at all impatient for their food. Let me see if I can contextualize this. Yeah, it almost seems like, in a way, it's like the opposite of how it is now. It's like, yeah, because when you're moving around, it seems like you're impatient. It's like, it seems like you can't wait if you can't sit still in one spot. But here, in Leo Tolstoy's book, it's like it's saying the opposite. It's like the people who are sitting there talking a long time are the ones who can't wait, and the ones who are walking around and talking are the ones who can. Yeah, that is the meaning there. The host and hostess look toward the door, and now and then they glance at one another. And the visitors try to guess from these glances who or what they're waiting for. Some important relation who has not yet arrived, or a dish that is not yet ready. Hors d'oeuvres. Yeah, I guess it could be interchangeable, depending on how hungry you are. It's like, ooh, dinner, big juicy burger, or ooh, it's my friend I haven't seen in a long time. They're both really enticing. They're both something you look forward to receiving. Pierre had just come at dinner time and was sitting awkwardly in the middle of the drawing room on the first chair he had come across, blocking the way for everybody. Again, Pierre is somewhat of an outsider, still. The Countess tried to make him talk, but he went on naively looking around through his spectacles as if in search of somebody, and answered all her questions in monosyllables. Ja, no. Okay. Actually, isn't okay 2 syllables? Okay. Yeah, I think okay is 2 syllables. Yes is 1. Yeah, so like yes would be a good example. Like, yes, no. Okay, yeah, okay and maybe are both 2 syllable examples. So that, yeah, yeah, okay, yeah, okay, yeah, yes and no would be a better example for Pierre of what he was saying. Okay, Diamond Dust Cube has a question for us. Have you ever stepped on a bug on purpose, and if so, would you ever do it again? Good question, Diamond. Good question. I believe, yes, I have. In the past, when I was like in the kindergarten, I used to pick up like little fire ants, and they would sting my hands, and I would sometimes step on them to try to get revenge for them stinging me on my hands. I think I was just curious at the time about the ants when I was like 5 years old. And that's one time when this has happened. Okay? Sometimes nowadays, I will step on bugs, especially if they're inside my room. But if they're outside, I would say I try my best to avoid stepping on them. I try to protect the natural order and balance nowadays. Do what I can to respect nature. And if I find a bug inside of my room now, more often than not, if at all possible, I try to capture it and let it go outside. That's not always possible, though. Sometimes I do need to take them out, so to speak, to prevent them from getting me in the night. A recent example was like a mosquito landing on the wall. I had to take it out because capturing it was not advised. But yes, thank you for the question, Diamond. Yeah, I got bit by a lot of mosquitoes recently, so that makes it a little bit more likely for me to try to take them out, too. It's like I don't want that happening again. So yeah, I try to prevent it from happening again. Yeah, interesting questions. Yeah, this has not happened a lot, Diamond. Like, I have not tried stepping on a lot of bugs, and I would say it happens less often now. Yeah, now I'm a mature adult. I try to do what I can to protect nature and the balance of nature. At least try to, anyway. Yeah, swimming pools are a good place for bees and dragonflies to drown. Sometimes I'll find them in the pool. If I do, if possible, I try to get them out of the pool so they can continue about their way. Just to give you an idea. Okay. Alright, where was I? Yeah, sometimes I use like leaves and stuff to try to get them out, especially if I'm afraid of getting stung, but yeah. Alright, where was I? The Countess. Yeah, he answered in monosyllables. He was in the way and was the only one who did not notice the fact. Most of the guests, knowing the affair with the bear, looked with curiosity at this big, stout, quiet man, wondering how such a clumsy, modest fellow could have played such a prank on a policeman. Well, the simple answer for that is because he's big. Sometimes size alone matters. And I don't know, I think Russian cops back then had guns. Let's look it up. Yeah, this was definitely after the advent of firearms, so I'm pretty sure they had guns back then. It was established. The police of Russia was established in 1715 by decree from Peter the Great, and in 2011 replacing the militia, the former police service. It is a federal police service of Russia and operates according to the law on police, as approved by the Federal Assembly and subsequently signed into law on February 7, 2011 by the President of the Russian Federation, Dmitry Medvedev. Yeah, I'm looking at a picture from 1800. It looks like they have swords. I guess they can be somewhat likened to military back then. Like if you think about military during the American Revolution times, like they had muskets, they had swords. Yeah, this guy has a sword. Yeah, the guy in the picture has a sword and a spear. So the policeman that Pierre pulled the prank on maybe didn't see a reason to use his sword on Pierre for such an incident. Yeah, presumably. Yeah, presumably they had somewhat antiquated versions of firearms back then. Diamond YouTube challenge about stepping on bugs. Actually, fun fact, bugs far outnumber humans. And also a fun fact, I took a class on bugs back when I was in university, UCR. I took a class on the history of, not history of insects, but entomology, like 101, like the basic of insects. And I learned about a lot of different kinds. Their scientific names. It's hard for me to remember now because it was so long ago. It seems like Diptera. Yeah, there's Diptera, Hymenoptera. Hymenoptera, from what I remember, were like wasps. We learned about parasitoids, like little wasps that would like land on different other bugs and implant their offspring in the other insect to create the next line. Actually, it's pretty fascinating. Like, who knows, I might study insects full time if I can land a gig doing it. Yeah, entomology. Yeah, Hymenoptera are bees, wasps, and ants. Yeah, I think you'd be pretty hard pressed nowadays. Yeah, Diamond, you'd be pretty hard pressed nowadays to find me stomping on any bugs. Yeah, I just let them fly around and do whatever they may. I think The only insects I kill with prejudice right now are mosquitoes. Those are the only ones. And those ones are hard to find. The mosquitoes, they tend to buzz around, and I even got these little blue bug zappers for them. The light is supposed to attract them so they get burned on the superheated metal. Yeah, mosquitoes definitely do not like mosquitoes, but all the other bugs are fine. Okay. Where was I? Yeah, how could he have played such a prank on the policeman because he did not use his sword? That is why. You've only lately arrived? The Countess asked him. Oui, madame, replied he, looking around him. You've not seen my husband yet? No, madame. He smiled quite inappropriately. You've been in Paris recently, I believe. I suppose it's very interesting. Very interesting. The Countess exchanged glances with Anna Mikhailovna. The latter understood that she was being asked to entertain this young man, and sitting down beside him, she began to speak about his father. But he answered her as he had the Countess, only in monosyllables. You've been in Paris. Oui, Paris. I've never been, actually. Quite sadly. Ha ha ha. Maybe someday I'll go. To experience it. To see it in person. To say hello to all the French people. Bonjour, mademoiselle. Ah yes, I see it now. The other guests were all conversing with one another. The Razumovskys. It was charming. You're very kind, Countess Apraxina, was heard on all sides. The Countess rose and went into the ballroom. Maria Dmitrievna, came her voice from there. Herself, came the answer in a rough voice, and Maria Dmitrievna entered the room. All the unmarried ladies and even the married ones, except their very oldest, rose. Maria Dmitrievna paused at the door, tall and stout, holding high her 50-year-old head with its gray curls. She stood surveying the guests and leisurely arranged her wide sleeves as if rolling them up. Maria Dmitrievna always spoke in Russian. Health and happiness to her whose name day we are keeping, and to her children, she said in her loud, full tone of voice, which drowned all the others. Well, you old sinner, she went on, turning to the Count, who was kissing her hand, you're feeling dull in Moscow, I dare say. Nowhere to hunt with your dogs? But what is to be done, old man? Just see how these nestlings are growing up. And she pointed to the girls. You must look for husbands for them, whether you like it or not. Yes, of course, they will all be married. Well, said she, how's my Cossack? Maria Dmitria always called Natasha a Cossack, and she stroked the child's arm as she came up, fearless and gay to kiss her hand. I know she's a scamp of a girl, but I like her. She took a pair of pear-shaped ruby earrings from her huge reticule, and having given them to Rosie Natasha, who beamed with the pleasure of her Saint's Day feat, turned away at once, addressed herself to Pierre. Let's see. A feat is a festival. Friend, come here a bit, said she, assuming a soft, high tone of voice. Come here, my friend. And she ominously tucked up her sleeves still higher. Pierre approached, looking at her in a childlike way through his spectacles. Come near, friend. I used to be the only one to tell your father the truth when he was in favor, and in your case it's my evident duty. She paused. All were silent, expectant of what was to follow, for this was clearly only a prelude. A fine lad, my word, a fine lad. His father lies on his deathbed, and he amuses himself setting a policeman astride a bear. For shame, sir, for shame. It would be better if you went to the war. Like, it would be better if you died in a battlefield, instead of picking on our poor innocent police. They're just trying to uphold the law. And you're over here messing around with them. What's the matter with you, Pierre? What's wrong with you? She turned away and gave her hand to the Count, who could hardly keep from laughing. Well, I suppose it's time we're at the table, said Marya Dmitrievna. The Count went in first with Marya Dmitrievna. The Countess followed on the arm of the Colonel of Hussars, a man of importance to them because Nicholas was to go with him to the regiment. Then came Anna Mikhailovna with Shinshin. Berg gave his arm to Vera. The smiling Julie Karagina went in with Nicholas. After them, other couples followed, filing the whole dining hall. And last of all, the children, tutors, and governesses followed singly. The footmen began moving about, chairs straight. The band struck up in the gallery, and the guests settled down in their places. Then the strains of the Count's household band were replaced by the clatter of knives and forks, the voice of visitors, and the soft steps of the footmen. At one end of the table sat the Countess, with Marya Dmitrievna on her right arm and Anna Mikhailovna on her left. The other lady visitors were farther down. At the other end sat the Count, with the Hussar colonel on his left and Shinshin on the other male visitors on his right. Midway down the long table on one side sat the grown-up young people, Vera beside Berg and Pierre beside Boris, and on the other side the children, tutors, and governesses. It's like one of those giant dinner tables, I'm guessing, based on this description. From behind the crystal decanters and fruit vases, the Count kept glancing at his wife and her tall cap with its light blue ribbons, and busily filled his neighbor's glasses, not neglecting his own. The Countess, in turn, without omitting her duties as hostess, threw significant glances from behind the pineapples at her husband, whose face and bald head seemed by the redness to contrast more than usual with his gray hair. At the ladies' end, an even chatter of voices was heard at the time. At the men's end, the voices sounded louder and louder, especially that of the Colonel of Hussars, who, growing more and more flushed, ate and drank so much that the Count held him up as a pattern to the other guests. It's like, yeah, please do clean us out of all of our food. Please do clean out our cupboards. Do not let us have leftovers. That is your mission. For you all. Berg, with tender smiles, was saying to Vera that love is not an earthly feeling, but a heavenly feeling. Ooh, baby, do you know what that's worth? Ooh, heaven is a place on earth. Yeah, I guess this inspired that song, by the sound of it. Boris was telling his new friend Pierre who the guests were, and exchanging glances with Natasha, who was sitting opposite. Pierre spoke little but examined the new faces and ate a great deal. Of the two soups, he chose turtle with savory patties and went on to the game without omitting a single dish or one of the wines. These latter, so not the first ones, but the last ones who came. These latter, the butler thrust mysteriously forward, wrapped in a napkin from behind the next man's shoulders, and whispered, "Dry Madeira, Hungarian, or Rhine wine, as the case may be." Of the 4 crystal glasses engraved with the Count's monogram that stood before his plate, Pierre held out one at random and drank with enjoyment, gazing with ever-increasing amiability at the other guests. Whew, chapter 18 is quite a long chapter. Quite long. Sometimes that same look fell on Pierre, and that funny, lively little girl's look made him inclined to laugh without knowing why. Nicholas sat at some distance from Sonia beside Julie Karagina, to whom he was again talking with the same involuntary smile. Sonia wore a company smile, but was evidently tormented by jealousy. Now she turned pale, now blushed and strained every nerve to overhear what Nicholas and Julie were saying to one another. The governess kept looking around, uneasily as if preparing to resent any slight that might be put upon the children. The German tutor was trying to remember all the dishes, wines, the kinds of dessert, in order to send a full description of the dinner to his people in Germany, and he felt greatly offended when the butler with the bottle wrapped in a napkin passed him by. He frowned, trying to appear as if he did not want any of that wine, but was mortified because no one would understand that it was not to quench his thirst, or from greediness that he wanted it, but simply from a conscientious desire for knowledge. Well, part of the reason for that could be because of your language. Like if you're speaking German and they're speaking Russian, they will not be able to understand you. Such is the nature of language. And he's like in Tarzan, it's like, what's that song? It's a Phil Collins song. Yeah, I don't know, I'm forgetting. Let me see if I can figure it out from a quick Google search. It's not build high the walls, build strong the beams. Yes, I wanna know, can you show me? I wanna know about the strangers like me. Like, that is this German tutor in this Russian party. He's like, I want to know more about you Russians. Yep, I want to know, can you show me? Phil Collins. On that note, thank you as always for watching the Stormer Show. I hope you enjoyed today's reading series. I know that these concepts that we are exploring on Stormer Show are pretty advanced concepts, like family and community giving way to state and markets. Like, yes, we're seeing that we haven't yet seen all the implications come to fruition. But as I've said, abortion is like one example of how state is creeping into the family. Yeah. And of course, War and Peace. The hardest part for me with this book, I will tell you all, is understanding the characters. Like, Pierre is probably the one character that really stands out to me because he actually stands out in the story. Like, he's the one that consistently is the black sheep in every situation he's in, and maybe that allows me to more easily connect with his character. I don't know, but all the others, like Prince Vasily, Princess Mikhailovna, Princess who is it? Yeah, Nicholas and Julie and Sonia and Berg. Sorry, not Berg. Yeah, Berg and Boris. It's like a lot of those characters, it's hard for me to remember about the character. So I might need to do a recap. Maybe even put watch a video about it where they kind of play out some of the earlier scenes. If I had the ability, I could make something like this. if I just keep improving my creative skills, I can. Whew, it's like one big improvement project I'm undergoing right now. So, as always, thank you for watching the show. Thank you for supporting the show. Thank you for watching. Thank you for following. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for donating. Stormer Show, signing off.